that off. Off. All right, we good?
Yep. Let's do
All
it.
right, we're in Matthew chapter 27. We will not finish Matthew today.
No, we haven't even finished chapter 27.
Is anybody shocked?
Literally 20.
So last week, if you remember, I kind of introduced us to this lesson, which is really about the trial in front of Pilate. So we're going to go back and review a little bit some of the stuff that I talked about last week, just to get us rolling. And I will say, again, that the lesson, most of the lesson is contained in verses 11, 12, and 13. But unfortunately, most of the details are in other Gospels. So we're going to be spending time in John 18 and Luke 23 quite a bit in order to pick up the whole story. So it really started out last time. I started with the question in verse 11, right? It says, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And the question that I had was, why does he bring up that question, right? Why does he even ask that question? It seemed like an odd question to start the discussion with. And so we went back to John 18. So let's go ahead and go there. John 18, beginning of verse 28. We'll kind of walk through those again. John 18, 28. Mine says, "And they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium, and it was early morning, but they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover." Again, these were the Jewish leaders are now leading Jesus to Pilate in the praetorium where he lived, or where he stayed at that time. And they wouldn't go in because it was a Gentile area. And again, these are these guys that are, straining a gnat and eating a camel, right? Because they won't do something silly like go into the Gentile area, but they're now killing the Messiah. But anyway, verse 29, Pilate then went out to them because they couldn't come in. He went out and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" And they answered and said to him, "If he were not an evildoer, we would not deliver him up to you." Again, the craziness of these people. He's asking for the accusation. What's the charge? What's the, what are you bringing against him? And they're saying, well, we don't have to tell you that. We just want you to rubber stamp. We just want you to kill him. We wouldn't have brought him if he wasn't an evildoer. In verse 31, Pilate said to him, "You take him and judge him according to your law." And so, he's saying, hey, if you think he's an evildoer, you take care of him. And the Jews respond, "It's not lawful for us to put anyone to death." And as we talked about last time, the Jews did not have the authority to put anyone to death during this time. Only the Romans did. They could give them permission, or they could do it themselves. In this particular case, obviously, they did it themselves. And verse 32, saying that Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he would die. And we look back at John chapter 12, where Jesus said that he would be lifted up, indicating that he would be put to death on the cross. So, and then verse 33, then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" So that brings us back to where we were in Matthew. The problem is, again, why the chief priests and scribes are bringing to him, they're saying he's, they don't actually bring a charge against him here, but he's still asking this question, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And if you remember, we had to go back to Luke chapter 23. You can turn there, or I can just turn there. Luke chapter 23, verses 1 and 2. It then says, "Then the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, 'We found this fellow perverting the nations, forbidding the paying of taxes to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ the King.'" So again, he's making they're making these three charges against him, but these charges have completely no basis whatsoever. They've just made them up. They've made them up because they knew that just saying that Jesus was a blasphemer was not enough for the Romans to put him to death. And so they had to make up charges that the Romans would find serious, and obviously the charge that he's making himself king, claiming to be king, forbidding taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And when it says perverting the nation, it really is kind of riling up the nation against the Romans is what they're saying. And so again, to bring a charge against them such that the Romans would actually do something about it and would kill him. All right, so then we get finally back to Matthew, and he asks this question, "Are you the king?" And Jesus' response in Matthew is, "It is as you say." Now, as I said last time, as we finished up, as we saw before, Jesus used this expression, but there's a lot more detail behind this expression. And in our particular case, that detail is back again in John chapter 18. So I do want you to turn back to John chapter 18 again. And we want to pick up the story there in verse 32. So John chapter 18, verse 32. So again, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, signifying by which death he would die, as we've mentioned. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" So just so you get the sequence here. So Pilate was out on the porch talking to the chief priests and scribes. He then returns inside the praetorium. Jesus is inside, remember, and now he asks him this question, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus then responds in verse 34. Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" So part of what Jesus is doing here is saying, okay, do you have witnesses to this fact? Or is this something that, has some witness told you this? Or is this something that you have just figured out by yourself, that somehow that I'm a king? And then Pilate responds in verse 35, Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? It's your own nation, and the chief priests have delivered you to me." He's saying to them, it's not me bringing this charge, it's your own people, it's the chief priests, it's them that's saying that's bringing this charge against you, that's saying that you are a king. And then he finishes it with this, "Well, what have you done?" So again, this is completely illegal for Pilate to be asking this question, right, of Jesus. There should be someone bringing a charge against him, but he's asking Jesus, "What have you done?" so that he would have to self-incriminate himself, and of course he doesn't answer it in the way that Pilate expects at all. So he asks again, the fundamental question is, "Are you a king?" And then Jesus responds in verse 36, right? He answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews, but now my kingdom is not from here." And if you remember, I read this verse back when we saw the arrest and Peter cutting off the ear of the servant. And Jesus essentially is saying the same thing here. My servants could have fought. They could have rose up against you, right? And of course, I could have brought down 12 legions of angels, but that's not what my kingdom is about. It's not about this world. It's not about a fight in this world. It's not about a battle that needs to be won here in the world, right? My kingdom is not from here. Now, one thing, notice in that statement, right? My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight. But now my kingdom is not from here. So he's really focusing on, his kingdom, right? He has a kingdom, and it's his kingdom, and it's not of this world. He doesn't say it's not in this world. He says it's not of this world. It's not from this world. It's not based on this world. And as an example of this, that this is not a kingdom of this world, my servants would not fight. If it was a kingdom of this world, then yeah, my servants would fight, but it's not. He's just using that picture of the servants fighting as an example, just to show that it's not that kind of kingdom at all. So verse 37 then, Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you king then?" And Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king." Right? So again, Jesus does not deny it here, right? He is saying he is a king. And for this cause I was born. Excuse me. For this cause I was born, for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice.
Hmm.
You have rightly said, I am a king. In other words, he's saying, yes, I'm a king, right? For this reason I was born, for this reason I have come to be king. And then, he makes the statement, such that I bear witness to the truth. This is, so it's important to realize, this is what Jesus is saying about himself. This is why I came, to bear witness to the truth, to tell the truth, to bring the truth, right? And of course, to be the truth, but to bring witness to the truth. That is what, it's the truth about the kingdom. It's a truth about eternal life. It's the truth. That's what he's bringing. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Maybe he's saying everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. It's those who hear his voice are of the truth. I don't know. That's one of those pondering statements to me. There's deep in that. All right, we'll keep going. Verse 38, Pilate said to him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no fault in
Our
it all.
table. That other couple's there that always sits at that corner table.
Hey, David, your
Yeah,
mic.
can you hear me?
Yeah, your mic's open.
Mic's open. Okay.
Welcome, David and Terry. So, Pilate says here, what is truth? Now, there are several commentators who think this is, Pilate here is being very deep, asking this really deep question. I think he's just being sarcastic. Okay. I think he's just saying, oh, what is truth? Because he immediately turns his back, right? He says, what is truth? He doesn't wait for an answer. He turns his back. He went out to the Jews and says, I don't find any fault in this guy. I don't find any crime. So here we have the first instance where, again, as we've seen over and over again, Pilate now is saying, this man is innocent. This man is not guilty. There's nothing here that I see in him. He's done his he's had his trial. He's listened to the witnesses, if you will, and all he's getting from that is this man is innocent. All right, now, so Pilate comes out. So notice there, Pilate comes out to the Jews. He goes back out to the porch, and he says, I find no fault in him. I want you to turn for a minute to Luke chapter 23, because again, there's something else that happens here. In Luke chapter 23, verse 4, we read 1 and 2 a minute ago, verse 3 and 4. So the 3 again says, then Pilate asked him, saying, are you the king of the Jews? And he answered, it is as you say, the same thing as in Matthew. And then Pilate comes out to the chief priests and the crowd, and he says, I find no fault in this man. And then look at verse 5. But they were more fierce, saying, he stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. So the chief priests and scribes now get angry, right? Pilate has said he's innocent. I find no fault in him. And the crowd start, the chief priests and scribes get angry. They get more fierce, mine says, and he begins to stir up the people. He says that Jesus stirred up the people, right? They're putting pressure now back on Pilate. So go back a minute now to Matthew. Go back to Matthew. And let's look back at verse 11. Told you I'm still in 11. So it says, now Jesus stood before the governor. The governor asked him, saying, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus said, it is as you say. Right? And then all of that discussion that we just talked about in John took place. Pilate comes out and says he's innocent. And then we have verse 12. All right? And while he was being accused by the chief priests and the elders, he answered nothing. So now after Pilate comes back out, says he's innocent, the crowd is stirred up. The chief priests and scribes are angry, right? And now they're beginning to accuse him more and more. This guy is guilty. This guy, should be killed. This guy is a blasphemer, et cetera, right? They're giving him all this grief. They're trying to put pressure on Pilate, and Pilate is feeling pressure. Now, I hope you kept your finger in Luke. So go back to Luke chapter 23. Because what's happened, go back to verse 5 again. What happens in verse 5 is, again, they were being more fierce, saying he stirs up the people, teaching throughout Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. So Pilate then says, aha, here's a way for me to get out of this. I'm in between a rock and a hard place here. I got the people all saying that he's guilty and a blasphemer and blah, 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 blah. I have looked at him. I find that he's innocent. I don't know what to do here. But he hears them say that this guy's from Galilee. So he goes, verse 6. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked if the man were a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged in Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. So here's Pilate's out. He says, this is great. I will not have to charge him. I'm not going to have to deal with this guy. I'll just send him to Herod. This guy's from Galilee. I'll send him on to Herod, and he can take care of him. So Herod here is Herod Antipas. This is the same Herod that beheaded John the Baptist. He was in Galilee during Jesus' ministry in Galilee. Jesus never went to the town that he was in. He was in Tiberias, which is named after the Caesar. He went to many places in Galilee, but he did not go to Tiberias, where Herod was. As we'll see here, Herod was very disappointed. They never got to see Jesus. Look at verse 8, right? It says, now when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracles done by him. Hold your finger there for a minute and skip back to Matthew chapter 14. Matthew chapter 14, where we've already been. Matthew chapter 14, verse 1. Matthew chapter 14. Matthew 14 says, and at that time Herod the Tetrarch heard the report about Jesus, and he said to his servants, this is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead, and therefore these powers are at work in him. For Herod had laid hold of John, bound him in prison, blah, blah, blah. So you have the whole story of John being beheaded here. But when Herod first heard about Jesus, he thought it was John the Baptist who was raised from the dead. And so he was very interested in seeing Jesus and seeing what he could do. So back in Matthew now, or back in Luke rather. We're in Luke chapter 23, verse 8. Right? So when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad. He desired for a long time to see him because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracle done by him, right? He wanted to see a miracle. He wanted to see Jesus do something really cool and really amazing. I'll just say it's a little sidestep here. We got to be careful that we don't have Herod in us in this regard, right? We're looking for Jesus to do some kind of miracle. That's what it's all about, right? That's our main interest in Jesus, is to seeing him do a miracle. And we get so focused on Jesus doing a miracle, we miss what we're really supposed to have as a relationship with him, not just some Santa Claus that we go to and ask for a miracle. And so Herod was definitely in that boat. He was just about the miracles and just about what Jesus could do for him, rather than actually wanting to know who Jesus was and understand him. So just pay attention to that. All right. So verse 9, then he questioned him with many words, but he answered him nothing. So Herod questions Jesus. about who he is, what he is he a king, what's going on, right? And Jesus doesn't respond. Now, Jesus doesn't respond for a couple of reasons, but one of them being Herod actually has no authority here. He is in Jerusalem, even though he was from Galilee. Pilate actually has the authority in this area. And so Jesus, there's no reason for him to respond to Herod. Herod has heard all the stories, from the people in Galilee. He knows what Jesus can do. There's nothing of value in trying to explain these things to Herod. It's not like he's going to turn Herod around. So he answers nothing. Verse 10, when the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him, right? They're still going on and on and on, vehemently accusing him. He is a blasphemer. He shouldn't do this, blah, 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 blah. The other thing to remember is that Herod is a Jew. Herod is a Jew that is owned by the Romans, if you will, but he is a Jew. So to him the blaspheming charges would have some credence, but again, he has no authority to actually do something in this area. But again, the chief priests continue to accuse Jesus. Verse 11, then Herod with his men of war treated him with contempt and mocked him, arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him back to Pilate. So Herod just sees this whole thing as a joke, right? This guy is nothing. He is not important. He is of no value. He brings nothing to the table. And so he and his men just treat him with contempt, right? And just, abuse him, if you will. And then verse 12, that very day, Pilate and Herod became friends with each other. Because previously they had been at enmity. Isn't that wonderful that Jesus causes a great friendship between Herod and Pilate because they both hate him, right? I mean, it's amazing, right? And so, but notice here that Herod, in verse 11, Herod sends him back to Pilate. He realizes he has no authority, but he sends him back to Pilate. Then go on down to verse 13. It says, then Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and rulers and the people, said to them, you have brought this man to me as one who misleads the people. And indeed, having examined him in your presence, I have found no fault in this man concerning those things of which you accuse him. So here again, so Pilate has already said he's innocent, right? Now then he sends him to Herod. Herod sends him back. He goes back to the chief priests again and tells him that he finds no fault in him. And then verse 15, no, neither did Herod, for I sent you back to him, and indeed nothing deserving of death has been done by him. So here again, you got the witness of Pilate, you got the witness of Herod, both saying that there's no fault in this man, he's not guilty, he's innocent. All right, now finally we can go back to Matthew and pick up the rest of the story. So all of that really was the trials that Pilate and Herod were participating in. So back in verse 12, now it says, and while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he answered them nothing. So again, Pilate says he's innocent. Herod says he's innocent. What Pilate should have done at this point was simply disperse the crowd, right, and told them to go away. He's innocent, go away, right? But he doesn't do that. The crowd stays. And you got to ask yourself, why did Pilate not respond to the crowd, right? And it's in verse 13, then Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many things they testify against you? But he answered him not one word, so that the governor was greatly marveled greatly, right? He's amazed, he's marveling, but frankly, he's not doing his job. He's not actually dispersing the crowd. They're starting, the chief priests are starting to rile them up. Now, let me give you a little background, a little bit on Pilate. Now, Pilate was the governor, as I said. He's been there from 26 to 36 AD. Pilate has continued to be in trouble with the Romans. He has continued to do things that have angered the Jews, and the Jews have been sending messages back to Tiberius telling him this Pilate is a problem. He's abusing people. He's killing people that shouldn't be killed. There's been a couple of riots already in Jerusalem because of some of the things that Pilate has done. So Pilate is on a razor's edge with the folks in Rome. They are not too happy with him. So Pilate here is beginning to worry about this crowd, and he's beginning to worry. Gee, if I release Jesus, I could have a real riot in my hands because I've got all these people now that are saying that the chief priests continue, as it says, continue to say that he should be killed, and so he is very much concerned about releasing Jesus and having a riot, or condemning Jesus, and how could he condemn him because he knows that he's innocent? So he's in a really bizarre state. So when we get down, so again, Pilate is again looking for a way out of this situation because he knows he's in trouble, no matter which way he goes. So verse 15 says, "Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas." Now it's interesting, this custom of releasing the prisoner is not a Roman thing. It seems to be some local thing that Pilate actually did. And also in the other Gospels, it says that the crowds cried out to him to do this. It wasn't his idea. People asked for it. But you have this guy in prison who here is called a notorious prisoner. In John, he's called a robber and a plunderer. In Mark and Luke, he's called an insurrectionist and a murderer. This is a bad dude. But what's interesting here is think about this for a minute. This is someone who is an insurrectionist against Rome, right? That the Jews now are saying, hey, let's let this guy go, and not that Jesus guy. And what did they say Jesus was? An insurrectionist, right? So the double talk in the religious leaders here is just crazy. And you look at verse 17. It says, "Therefore, when they gathered together, Pilate said to them, 'Who do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Christ?'" Many of the commentaries and some of the earlier translations of Scripture indicate that Barabbas' first name was actually Jesus. Okay, so what he's saying here is, who do you want me to release for you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus the Christ? Pilate's trying to make very much a distinction here between this notorious murderer, robber, plunderer, insurrectionist, and the one that is called the Christ, the one who is your Messiah. So who do you want me to release for you, this murderer or the Messiah? I mean, Pilate couldn't lay it out more clearly for them as he's doing that. Now, what he's trying to do here is, it's just been a couple of days since Jesus came into the city, and the crowds were calling him Messiah, Son of David, King of the Jews, right? That's only been a couple of days ago. So Pilate knows that. And so what he's trying to do here is he knows, in fact, if you look at verse 18, it says, "For he knew that they handed him over because of envy." He knew there wasn't a real charge against Jesus. And so he's trying to pit the religious leaders now against the people, right? And say, well, the people certainly love Jesus and they, honored him and they, waved palm branches and the whole bit. It's just these religious leaders that are envious of him because he's so popular, because the crowds respond to him, right? So he's pretty sure at this point that they're going to choose Jesus. The crowd is going to choose Jesus because he's now out at the crowd. So look at verse 18, right? Because of this envy, he does this, right? So I really do think that Pilate understood what was going on, that he understood that the chief priests were just they were not bringing him someone who was an insurrectionist. In fact, if they were bringing him, if they thought Jesus was an insurrectionist, they would be hiding him, the chief priests, right? If they thought that he was against Rome, they're against Rome, and they would be protecting him. So Pilate had to know there's no way they're bringing someone forward as an insurrectionist, because if it really was an insurrectionist, they would hide him. So, in fact, in Luke 23, if you wanted to go back there, you'd see that Pilate actually asked the crowd 3 times, right? Do you want Jesus or do you want Barabbas? Do you want Jesus or do you want Barabbas? So he's going to the crowd, and then this weird thing happens in verse 19. Look there. It says, while he was sitting in the judgment seat, his wife sent to him, saying, have nothing to do with this just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him. So first, let's just deal with the verse and then the implications of the verse. So he's sitting in judgment. So he's sitting in the seat, right, to judge. And in those days, you would not interrupt someone who's sitting in the seat of judgment. My guess is his wife sends him this note, and he's none too happy that she would do this. I'm a little busy right now. I've got a trial going on. He sends him this note, and the note says, have nothing to do with this man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him. Now, we don't know, and nobody has a clear thought on, is this a dream that God put in her head? It is known from other sources that she's very likely a proselyte to Judaism, that she is a Jew, and that she has some understanding of what's going on with regard to him being potentially the Messiah, but we don't have any more information on her or what her response is here. But the main thing that happens here is he interrupts him, and while he is interrupted, while she is bringing this note, he's reading this note, he's responding to this note. Verse 20 happens. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. So I really think what's happened here is Pilate comes out to the crowd, says, do you want Jesus or do you want Barabbas, right? And he thinks the crowd is going to say, hey, we want Jesus, right? They've been crying, he's the Messiah, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's this little break, this little interruption. And while he's dealing with his wife, the chief priests and the scribes go out into the crowd and they start saying, hey, we really need to get this guy. Let me ask this question. What would be the chief priest's argument to the people? What would they say to the people to convince them that we need to kill Jesus and not Barabbas?
I was kind of wondering the same thing.
Well,
I've
they
never
were trying to-
understood why they turned around so quick.
they were trying to consolidate their power. The chief priests were trying to consolidate their power and get the people to turn back to them.
That's the chief priest's reason, but how could they convince the people to turn?
Barabbas is against Rome. Jesus really could care less about Rome, right? So if they played off the Roman as the bad guy in favor of Barabbas.
I think they could think, well, gee, Barabbas may be better for us, right? Let's have him around. He'll help in the insurrection. He'll help fight against Rome. Maybe he'll lead a charge and help defeat the Romans. I think that could be part of what they're thinking. Yeah. What else? I think all the arguments are along those lines. But, the other thing you recognize here is that the crowds out there, they brought this fellow to Pilate. Pilate comes out and says, I think this guy's innocent. We should let him go. Now, wouldn't that make you be a little bit suspicious? Why would Pilate let this guy go? If he's an insurrectionist, if he is saying that he's the king, so there may be very well be the people, the chief priest could go out and say, hey, this guy is really a spy. He's really someone working for Pilate. We can't let him go. We can't let him out. He's just a pawn of Rome. And by the way, he just attacked the temple. He just attacked all of our traditions. He just attacked everything you know about people, everything that's important. They turned over the money changer so that you can't get any good sheep anymore, right? You can't transfer your money anymore. You can't worship the way you are. By the way, he eats with sinners. He eats with Gentiles. I mean, all of the things that they have been saying all along, they just bring it back to the people now and let him know this is not the kind of person. This is someone who is saying that he is God. He's obviously not God. If he had been God, he would have defeated the Romans. If he was the Messiah, he would have brought out and maybe Barabbas, maybe he's the Messiah. I mean, I could just see all of this stuff going on as they're trying to convince the people and encourage them to do this. But anyway, that's what they do. They do get the crowd turned around, and now the crowd and the leaders are together. And we get down to verse 21. And the governor asked and said to them, by the way, just to interrupt myself, this message that he gets from his wife, right? He says, I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him. One thing that you should know is that most of the commentaries indicate that Pilate, after these events, actually committed suicide himself. So this dream that his wife had about what might happen certainly comes true in his own life. But anyway, let's go back to verse 21. The governor answered and said, which of the two do you want me to release to you? And they said, Barabbas. And Pilate said to him, what then shall I do with Jesus, who is called the Christ? And they all said to him, let him be crucified. Let him be crucified. I mean, it's just, it's just unbelievable. But you got to see the work of Satan here, right? In the chief priests and scribes, in the crowd, as they turn in this way. And then verse 23, then the governor said, why? What evil has he done? But they crowd out all the more, saying, let him be crucified. I just find it amazing here that the only sane person at this time appears to be Pilate, right? Saying, what in the world are you doing? This guy's innocent. What evil has he done? Let him be crucified. Verse 23, when Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was rising, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this person, this just person. You see to it. So when Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, so I got to say, this is wimpy Pilate right here, right? He could not prevail. He could not turn the crowd around. He could not disperse the crowd. I mean, you got to realize this is Pilate who controlled all of the Roman soldiers. He could have done whatever he wanted. But in his head, he wimps out here. He could not prevail. And then he does this washing of his hands. What's really interesting about this is a Jewish tradition, right? This is a Jewish tradition back in Deuteronomy about washing your hands to show that you're not guilty. And here Pilate is doing it. He is washing his hands to show that he is not guilty in front of these people. I am innocent of the blood of this just person. Again, he says it again. Pilate, by the way, says 5 times that Jesus is innocent. And here's another time, right? He's a just person. He's a righteous person. I am innocent of the blood of this righteous person. See to it, then, he says at the end. You see to it, which really a better translation might be, you take the responsibility. You take responsibility for his death because I ain't got it. I'm washing my hands of it. Verse 25, and this to me is the most absolutely incredibly horrible thing. Verse 25, and all the people answered and said, his blood be on us and on our children. Responsibility for this. The responsibility for his blood be on us and on our children. Turn to Acts for a minute. Turn to Acts chapter 5. Acts chapter 5. Let's see where I want to start. Huh. So I said Acts chapter 5, but that's obviously not the right place. Well, let me just tell you the story. So what happens in Acts is when Peter is teaching, and y'all will probably find it before I do. When Peter is teaching and he's telling them that you put Jesus to death, and the scribes and Pharisees respond, "Hey, everybody's going to think that it was our fault, right? That we brought the guilt, that we're guilty for this man's death." And what's amazing, right, is that here in Matthew, they're saying, "Hey, the blood be upon us." But then when they're confronted with that blood, later on in Acts, when Peter actually says that they're responsible, they say, "Hey, don't be trying to convince people that it's our fault. Don't be trying to convince people that we're guilty." It was not too long after, right, in 70 AD, when Jerusalem is destroyed. The blood is on them. Jerusalem is destroyed. 1 million people perish when Jerusalem is destroyed. Thousands of Jews were crucified, particularly the religious leaders. And again, as we think back on false witnesses getting their due, right? Remember that a false witness was supposed to get the death that the person was condemned to. So now you're seeing the false witnesses, i.e. the chief priests and scribes, are being crucified when Jerusalem is destroyed. They're getting their due as false witnesses for what they have done. And in all honesty, the heartbreak of Jerusalem over the centuries, you've got to connect that here to them saying, "His blood be on us and on our children." The horror that the Jews have gone through over these centuries and are going through now is all connected to this verse. "His blood be on us and our children." It's an amazing statement to me. All right, verse 26 to wrap this up. Then Pilate released Barabbas to them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. I want to hold the scourging until next time, because again, there's it's not something we want to go over lightly. So I don't want to do it here in 5 minutes. I want to make sure we have time to spend time on what actually happened to him as he was scourged and then put on the cross. So we'll just stop there with this trial. Again, I think, as we've said last time, Matthew's main point is to show the majesty of the Lord, show the glory of the Lord. And what we're seeing here in these two trials, the trials of the Jews and the trials of the Romans, is God being glorified, God being said to be innocent, 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 all over, right? By Caiaphas, by the people, by Judas, by Pilate, by Herod, everyone saying that he's innocent. And I think that Pilate's, again, Matthew's main message, this is an innocent man who has been crucified here. All right, anything else on this?
I just had a question on the phrase "you see to it." Is that,
Yeah.
that was, you talked about the responsibility. Is it also like an action, like you take care of business? It's just the same phrase that was used when the chief priest, what they said to Judas when he returned the 30 pieces of silver, which almost seems like, hey, you're looking to get the same, if you feel guilty, the same sentence that you would have received, but you go take care of business, you go hang yourself. Was that?
Yeah, I think it's connected, Dan. It's I'll be honest with you, in the commentaries, they're all over the place on this little phrase. And so there's no question there's a sense of responsibility being given back to them, but there's also a sense of just, I don't want to deal with this. Go take care of it. Go forward with this. That is being said here. So yeah, it's one of those complex phrases that doesn't interpret well. Anything else here?
You know, I was just kind of struck with the comment about when they sent Jesus to Herod, and Herod was joyful to see him. This is the same Herod that killed all the babies when Jesus was born, because he perceived him as a huge threat. So
No, wait. It's not the same Herod. That was Herod the Great. That was his father, who killed all the babies. So this is his son. This is 30 years later.
that's what I'm missing.
Yeah.
But even so, he had to have known his father saw him as that great threat.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember too, right? The passage of time and the idiocy of these people, right? At that time, right? The Herod said there was someone in the land who was born a king, so let's kill all the people, right? Let's kill all the boys. So he did that, and probably thought we took care of it, right? We got that kid, no problem. So I'm not sure there's a connection between, we got to look out for people because that guy still may be alive. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But yeah, but this definitely is the same one that killed John the Baptist, and it is weird.
Same one. But maybe it's just the passage of time that the threat didn't materialize, and now he's being delivered to him on a plate, and he doesn't have any. That's why he's looking for the miracle, I guess. Are you really this guy you say you are? I found that an interesting dichotomy, I guess. That
Yeah, I find it a little odd because I find it a little odd for a different reason that he still might think that he's John the Baptist, right? Is this John the Baptist who's come back to life? Is that still in his head? Or is he already transitioned to, well, this is not John the Baptist and just as a miracle worker and I'm going to see something cool? That's a little odd to me, to be honest, Rick. But, these guys lived in a different world, separate from all reality and all normal stuff. And I think that they're just looking for a good time. And that's why they wanted Jesus. It's crazy. All right. Anything else before we go to prayer time? All right, Joe, anything from here? Nope.
Don't forget David.
Yeah.
Recording.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure where that voice came from. Let me start with David and Terry since they're online.
Yeah, turn off the recording.
Yeah, so that voice was not from me.